When enhanced by her 7th-level sword intent, the green energy swords seemed as if they were material. The terrifying energy contained within them caused the space around Imo Qingyu to tremor incessantly, as if it would explode into pieces at any moment. The expressions of the group from the Nether Territory, Devil Territory, and Demon Territory changed when they witnessed this scene. They hadn't expected that such a formidable expert existed amongst the humans. Mo Ku and Han Yu's expressions were extremely calm, and there was merely a wisp of a solemn and gloomy expression in the depths of their eyes. Yang Ye's expression became extremely solemn because Mo Qingyu's strength was extremely formidable indeed. Not to mention his current state, he might not necessarily be able to defeat her even at this price. Coupled with the fact that he'd been heavily injured by Mo Ku just now, how could he possibly resist her attack? I'm still too weak in the end. Yang Yi took a deep breath as he shook his head, and then he suddenly clenched his right fist. Bang! A light bang resounded as Yang Ye's right sleeve exploded apart to reveal his arm that was covered in veins that crept throughout his arm like worms. At this moment, he had to do it even if he couldn't. Right at this moment, the 100 green energy swords that were floating in front of Mo Qingyu had suddenly stopped moving. In the next moment, they swiftly transformed into 100 rays of light that shot forward explosively. Yang Ye's pupils constricted. Right when he was about to make a move, the energy swords had suddenly fused together into one, and they even sped up explosively. It arrived before him in an instant, and it stabbed into his chest before he could even counterattack. The green energy sword stopped for a split second before it shot straight through his chest. Yang Yi suddenly opened his eyes wide while his body stiffened on the spot. However, Mo Qingyu suddenly vanished on the spot, and a violent gale shot towards the surroundings as she instantly arrived in front of Yang Yi. After that, she stabbed a green energy sword through Yang Ye's dantian before spinning it right after. Her sword intent erupted within Yang Ye's dantian, and it instantly minced Yang Ye's dantian into pieces. So, the so-called Sword Emperor is actually so weak. Mo Qingyu shook her head as she gazed at Yang Yi, and then her figure flashed and returned to where she stood previously. After that, she gazed at Xiao Yushi, who had a stunned expression, and said, "You know where to find me if you want to avenge your little lover." As soon as she finished speaking, a ray of light flashed as she left on her sword. Mo Ku glanced at where Yang Ye's dantian was, and there was a striking and huge fist-sized hole there. Mo Ku shook his head, and then he led the group from the devil race away. Since his dantian had been shattered, Yang Yi would be a cripple even if he could survive. So, Mo Ku would naturally not make a move against a crippled because it was degrading. Han Yu gazed at Yang Yi while a wisp of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Yang Yi was a sword cultivator, and he was one who had comprehended 6th-level sword intent. So, if Han Yu was able to devour Yang Ye's soul, then his strength would definitely improve greatly. But in that way, he would definitely incur the wrath of the white-haired woman at the side. He was naturally not afraid of the white-haired woman, but at least 30% of his other companions would probably die during the battle. So, when he thought up to here, Han Yu glanced coldly at Yang Yi and Xiao Yushi, and then he led the group from the Nether Territory away. Suddenly, Xiao Yushi appeared in front of Yang Yi, who had his eyes closed, and her eyes were slightly blank as she gazed at the 2 holes on Yang Ye's chest. It wasn't that she refused to lend a hand earlier, and it was instead because Mo Qingyu, who'd comprehended wind intent, was truly too swift, and Mo Qingyu had been swift to the point she didn't have the time to stop Mo Qingyu. "I'll go take revenge for you." Xiao Yushi turned around and intended to leave as soon as she finished speaking these words. However, right at this moment, a hand grabbed her hand, and it caused her body to stiffen. After that, she swiftly turned around to gaze at Yang Yi, who'd opened his eyes, and her voice was slightly trembling. You're still alive." Yang Yi was naturally still alive. If Mo Qingyu hadn't followed up with that second attack, then he would have really died, because Yang Yi wasn't a god in the end. However, Mo Qingyu had followed up her first attack with another attack, and she'd crippled his dantian. Yes, the reason he was still alive was that his dantian had been destroyed. He should have died. But at the moment his dantian was destroyed, The tiny vortex that had been silent until now had suddenly expanded, and then it exploded with a bang. Subsequently, it appeared where his dantian used to be. No, it should be said that the place where his dantian used to be had been transformed into the world within the tiny vortex. To put it simply, the tiny vortex had become his dantian. After the tiny vortex became his dantian, the golden profound energy within it had started surging through his body like a torrent, and the regenerative ability of the golden profound energy caused the injuries on his chest to instantly stop bleeding. Moreover, they started recovering at an alarming speed. This was the reason why he'd survived. Moreover, after the golden profound energy had flowed throughout his body, Xianxia's cultivation had improved like a rocket, and he'd instantly leaped from the 5th rank of the King Realm to the 9th rank of the King Realm. He's advanced by 4 ranks in an instant. This wasn't even the end of it. After he advanced into the 9th rank of the King Realm, the gold profound energy within his tiny vortex had slowly started turning light violet in color. Moreover, Xianxia was pleasantly surprised to notice that besides the dark beasts, all the other treasures within his tiny vortex had actually undergone a tremendous transformation. The 36 low-grade earth-rank swords had transformed into peak high-grade earth-rank swords. The ice soul fruit and vermilion spirit fruit trees had actually grown to a height of over 10 m tall, and the trees were densely covered in tiny ice soul fruits and vermilion spirit fruits. Of course, Xianxia was even more shocked because a door had actually appeared above the pool of profound energy. However, the door was tightly closed. This sudden and unexpected change had completely stunned Xianxia. Of course, he couldn't help but feel overjoyed after he recovered from his shock. Because he'd noticed something, and that was he could utilize the light violet profound energy within the pool of profound energy. The entire pool full of profound energy. Xianxia believed that even a spirit realm expert couldn't compare to him in volume. From now onward, he could utilize profound energy without any restraints, and he didn't have to worry about it drying up. Xianxia suppressed the wild joy in his heart and opened his eyes when he just happened to hear Xianxia, and it caused his heart to be instantly filled with warmth. When he saw that Xianxia intended to turn around and take revenge for him, Xianxia hurriedly stopped her because while revenge had to be taken, it was he who had to do it. Xianxia instantly heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Xianxia was fine, and then she maintained her composure as she pulled her hand from Xianxia's grasp. After that, she glanced at Xianxia and said, "It's good that you're fine. Thank you." Xianxia gazed at the woman before him as he spoke in a serious manner. If it wasn't for this woman who'd made Moku and Hunyu afraid, he would definitely die even if the tiny vortex had undergone a transformation. Because he was still in a heavily injured state just now. Xianxia didn't meet Xianxia's gaze. Her gaze was aimed at the ground, and she said after a while, "I'm able to sense that your strength has improved greatly. I don't know why you've instantly improved so swiftly. You ought to be aware that great haste isn't always good speed. Sometimes, it's useless if your cultivation rises too quickly, but your mental state is unable to keep up." Xianxia smiled bitterly. He naturally understood this principle. However, it was utterly out of his control. All he could do now was to try his best to get accustomed to his current realm of cultivation and allow his mental state to catch up. Otherwise, he would be a weak and inferior profounder at the 9th rank of the King Realm. Xianxia suddenly asked, "What do you intend to do after this?" Xianxia was stunned when he heard this, and then a cold glow flashed in his eyes. He said, "I naturally have to get even with them. I can't have suffered those 2 attacks for nothing." Xianxia shook her head and said, "The Nether God's tomb will be opening tomorrow, and the souls within it are much purer than the souls here. Moreover, numerous treasures the Nether God left behind all those years ago resides in the tomb. It would be a pity to miss it. Besides that, even though your strength has improved greatly, you're probably still unable to kill Moku, Hunyu, and Moqingyu. Their strengths are far greater than what you've seen. So, it's best for you to improve your strength first." Xianxia fell silent. Needless to say, Xianxia really made sense. Even though his strength had improved explosively right now, it was clearly impossible for him to kill them now. Unless he utilized the enlightened sword heart and the nether ghost flame, otherwise, he didn't have any advantage against them. The nether ghost flame. Xianxia's eyes suddenly opened wide when he thought about it, because only now had he noticed that he seemed to have overlooked the tiny flame within the tiny vortex. Yang Yi didn't mind Xiao Yuxi's presence by his side. He opened his palm and issued a command in his heart, and then a light swish resounded as a strand of flame suddenly appeared at the center of his palm. Xiao Yuxi's pupils constricted violently when she witnessed this scene, and then she instinctively took a step back while she placed her right hand on her saber's hilt. She said, "What's that?" Yang Yi smiled and said, "The nether ghost flame." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi gazed at the nether ghost flame. He noticed to his surprise that it had undergone a transformation as well, because the ghastly white color flame had become pure white in color. Moreover, it was much larger than before and had become the size of 2 adult fingers. The nether ghost flame. Xiao Yuxi spoke with shock. How could you possibly possess such a treasure? With her background and knowledge, she naturally knew what the nether ghost flame was. It was exactly because she knew that she was shocked. Not to mention that Yang Yi was merely at the king realm. Even a spirit realm expert or exalt realm expert would find it impossible to subdue such a treasure of the heavens and the earth. Right at this moment, the nether ghost flame on Yang Ye's palm suddenly flashed and entered Yang Ye's vortex dantian. After that, it shot into the pool of profound energy and paid no further attention to Yang Yi. Since the little fellow left, the nether ghost flame was the strongest within the tiny vortex, so it naturally occupied the pool of profound energy. It was given to me by a senior, Yang Yi said. In the beginning, it was slightly unwilling to come with me, but now I think it wouldn't leave even if I drive it away. Ha ha! Indeed, the nether ghost flame would probably refuse to leave even if Yang Yi were to drive it away. After all, the tiny vortex was an existence that could help the nether ghost flame grow. Xiao Yuxi suddenly said, "You're too mysterious. Everyone has their own secrets, right?" said Yang Yi with a smile on his face. Xiao Yuxi nodded, and then she said, "Less than 2 hours remain before the nether god's tomb opens. Let's go." The nether god's tomb wasn't below ground, and it was on the surface instead. The tomb was extremely enormous and occupied an area of thousands of kilometers. Instead of calling it a tomb, one could call it a small city. When Yang Yi and Xiao Yuxi arrived here, it was filled with an ocean of people. Humans were the most numerous here, and there were over 10,000 of them, whereas the remaining were from the nether territory, devil territory, and demon territory. The nether god's tomb didn't just possess souls that could be utilized to improve one's own soul. The treasures that the nether god had left behind were here as well. So, how could they not be tempted by all of this? Yang Yi was surprised because he didn't see Han Yu and Mo Ku. Moreover, the 3 outstanding geniuses of the central territory weren't here as well. Yang Yi shook his head and shot his gaze towards the entrance to the tomb because there was a 300 tall tombstone there, and there were a few huge words written on it. The times would be dark without the martial god. Yang Yi asked Xiao Yuxi as he gazed at the tombstone. "What does that mean?" Xiao Yuxi glanced at it and said, "It means that if the martial god doesn't appear in the world, then the world would belong to the nether god." Why would there be such words here? Because the nether god was killed by the martial god of that age. The martial god of that age? Yang Yi frowned. He thought of Yuan Tong when he heard the words martial god. Yuan Tong was once called the quasi-martial god. However, it was a matter of the past, and Yang Yi didn't know how Yuan Tong was now. Xiao Yuxi nodded, and she revealed reverence in her eyes as she said, "The martial god of that age was truly matchless in the world and a true genius, because that martial god had comprehended 13 intents, and he'd cultivated every single one of them to their limits. So, even the nether god who'd attained the saint realm and possessed a practically undying body and soul had still died at his hands. 13 intents. Yang Yi was shocked and said, "He was that outstanding? How could he be called the martial god if he wasn't?" Xiao Yuxi said, "Since time immemorial, the world would submit before the martial god. Right, there was an exception, and it was during the age of the founding ancestor of the Southern Territory's sword sect. The martial god of that age lost to him. Besides that, So long as a martial god emerged into the world, then the martial god would reign supreme throughout the world. The Sword Sect's founding ancestor. Yang Yi felt silent. It wasn't the first time he'd heard about the Sword Sect's founding ancestor. How outstanding was he? Countless people still feel reverence towards him even after 10,000 years have passed. After all, even someone as formidable as Elder Mu had revealed a trace of reverence when he spoke about the Sword Sect's ancestor. He's like a god in the heart of all sword cultivators in the world, Xiao Yushi said, because he defeated the martial god of that age. After all, the sword emperors before him had practically always lost in the battle between the sword emperors and their natural enemies, the martial gods. Yang Yi smiled and said, invincible throughout the world in life and renowned through the ages in death. Haha, that's exactly how men should be like. Xiao Yushi glanced at Yang Yi, and then she fell silent. Time slowly flowed by and an hour passed just like that. When the last strand of sunlight west had vanished from the world, the sky had suddenly darkened. After that, a strand of cold wind appeared out of thin air, and it caused the expressions of everyone in the surroundings to change. Subsequently, the ground started to split up slowly before countless strands of black gas seeped out from the ground. Watch out! It's death energy that can destroy vitality. Don't allow it to come into contact with your bodies, someone suddenly shouted. In an instant, everyone besides the group from the Nether Territory had hurriedly started evading the black gas, and they didn't dare allow it to come into contact with their bodies. However, because there was truly too much of it, there were still countless people whose bodies were invaded by the black gas. In an instant, all of them who came into contact with the black gas had been instantly transformed into dry corpses. Ah! Profound energy is useless against it. Save me. Ah! Save me. I'm not going in there anymore. I'm not going in. Ah! Save me. Countless shouts resounded throughout the surroundings. Yang Yi frowned when he witnessed this scene, and then he flicked with his finger, causing a strand of sword chi to shoot forward explosively and blast the strand of black gas in front of him into powder. After that, he said, what exactly is this? Why is profound energy useless against it? He'd seen this black gas in the past because Luo Shui had utilized it to injure him in the past. If he didn't have the tiny vortex, then he would have probably become a dried corpse at that time. So, Yang Yi felt a wave of fear when he recalled that event. It's death energy. Xiao Yushi's eyes carried a wisp of a solemn expression, and she said, it's a type of energy that's formed naturally from the spirit, energy, and essence of the body after a person dies and the person's soul dissipates. This death energy can destroy the vitality of one's body, so you absolutely must not allow it to come into contact with you. Otherwise, it will be very troublesome to deal with. Yang Yi nodded. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked towards the distance. He saw that the members of the Nether Territory were actually moving about and absorbing the death energy that others shuddered in fear from just hearing about. Yang Yi spoke with an astounded expression. Why can they do that? Because there's no vitality in their bodies at all. Xiao Yushi said in a low voice. The death energy is extremely harmful towards us, but it's just like the souls here and is greatly beneficial to them. Remember that the Nether race can't be compared to the demon race and devil race. They're too mysterious, so you must be careful when you fight them in the future. Yang Yi nodded. The Nether race's method of attack was extremely strange indeed. It was impossible to take precautions against, so he had to be careful and couldn't be careless at all. The members of the Nether Territory slowly stopped solely absorbing the death energy. They even started acting against the human profounders. Because these human profounders were afraid of the death energy, they couldn't fight fearlessly like the fellows from the Nether Territory could. So, a few hundred human profounders had died at the hands of the Nether race in less than 15 minutes. Moreover, the members of the devil race had started to attack the human profounders as well. So, more and more humans were perishing under the joined forces of the Nether race and devil race. A slaughter had begun. Xiao Yushi frowned when she witnessed this scene, and she tightened her grip on her saber. She seemed to be slightly unable to continue watching. On the other hand, Xianxia's expression was calm, as if he hadn't noticed it at all. Do you know? Xianxia suddenly said. I'd once stood below ancient domain city and invited them to annihilate all those fellows of the devil race, demon race, and nether race with me. If they weren't so selfish at that time, then we could have annihilated all of these fellows. Unfortunately, not a single person came down from the city wall. So, whose fault is it that they're being killed now? Xianxia sighed lightly, and then she relaxed her grip on her saber. Perhaps she could save them this time, but what about next time? Since these human profounders dared to come to the ancient battlefield and dared to come here to the ninth hell, then they should be mentally prepared for death. Xianxia shook her head lightly and said, Let's enter the tomb. Xianxia suddenly asked, Why haven't Hunyu, Moku, and the others come here? It's not that they didn't come but that they've already gone in. Xianxia said, This isn't the only entrance to the Nether God's tomb. There are other ways to get in? Xianxia was astounded. Xianxia nodded and said, Of course. After all, this tomb was jointly built by the Nether race and human race later on. So, they naturally have their own ways to enter it. Alright, let's go in as well. They'd probably entered the inner crypt by now. As soon as she finished speaking, Xianxia tapped the ground lightly with the tip of her foot, and then she instantly shot explosively towards the entrance. When he saw this, Xianxia stopped hesitating and intended to enter the tomb as well. Right at this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. So Xianxia didn't give it any thought before he drew his sword and slashed. The black shadow hurriedly cried out, It's me, Leng Jun. Xianxia's hand stopped when he heard this, and then he gazed carefully at the black shadow. Sure enough, this black shadow was Leng Jun, who'd returned to the southern territory to gather the assassins. It's you, Xianxia said with displeasure. Why do you move so soundlessly? Leng Jun rolled his eyes. Big brother, I'm an assassin. If I don't move soundlessly, then could it be that I should swagger about and make a grand entrance? Leng Jun's heart shook when he recalled Xianxia's attack that was swift like a bolt of lightning, because he felt that Xianxia's strength had increased again. Moreover, it wasn't by a little, but by a huge amount, because he felt an extremely huge amount of pressure just now. You've brought them over? Asked Xianxia. Leng Jun nodded and said, This place is too chaotic. Come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and vanished on the spot. Xianxia hurriedly followed Leng Jun when he saw this. 15 minutes later, Leng Jun suddenly stopped within a dense forest, and then he turned around to gaze at Xianxia, who was behind him, and said, It's here! As soon as he finished speaking, he clapped lightly, and then almost 200 black figures suddenly appeared here in an instant. I've brought over everyone that I could get to. There are 72 King Realm assassins amongst them, and the rest are at the First Heaven Realm. However, even though they are at the First Heaven Realm, every single one of them has taken the life of King Realm experts, said Leng Jun. Xianxia nodded. Right when Xianxia was about to speak, a black figure had stepped forward and glanced at Xianxia before he said, You can remove the poison for us? Yes, Xianxia said, but all of you should be aware of the conditions. I've told them about it, said Leng Jun. I don't believe you, the black figure suddenly said. Even an Exalt Realm expert is helpless against that poison. How could a mere King Realm profounder like you be able to cure us of the poison? I don't believe you as well. Meanwhile, another black figure stepped forward and said, Shuiyu makes sense. How could he be able to accomplish something that even an Exalt Realm expert can't accomplish? I don't believe him as well. In next to no time, over 10 black figures had stepped forward. Shuiyu, are all of you suspecting that I deceived all of you? Meanwhile, Leng Jun said in a low voice. Besides that, since all of you didn't believe me, then why did you follow me here? Leng Jun, we followed you here because we thought you'd gotten to know an extraordinary expert. However, we never expected that it would be a mere King Realm profounder. Humph. It looks to me like dealing with the poison is a lie, and only working out selves to death for him is the truth behind all of this. Right? Said Shuiyu in a low voice. Leng Jun intended to say something, but Xianxia had waved his hand to stop Leng Jun, and then he said, Since all of you don't believe me, then leave. There was nothing wrong with him, so why would he beg them to let him remove the poison within them? Leave. Shuiyu grunted coldly and said, How could it be so simple? We traveled a huge distance to come here, yet you intend to send us off just like that? How could it be that simple? Xianxia nodded and said, Since it's like that, then I'll give all of you something. What? A ticket to hell. A strand of violet light flashed, and then over 10 heads flew into the air. Everyone was astounded. Shuiyu was a 4th-rank King Realm expert. However, he wasn't even able to resist a single strike of Xianxia's sword. Exactly how formidable is his strength? Leng Jun and Lang Yin exchanged glances, and both of them saw a wisp of shock and fear in each other's eyes. Because the speed of Xianxia's sword was already swift to the point they were unable to see its movement clearly. His strength has actually become so formidable in such a short period of time. Exactly what sort of monstrous genius is this? Xianxia shook his head as he gazed at those fellows who died with everlasting regret. His first impression upon arriving here was that these fellows didn't trust him, and many even felt hostile towards him. He knew that he had to make a show of strength. Otherwise, even if they become a sword in his hand, it was very likely that they would lash out against him at any moment. How should he make a show of strength? It was naturally by killing. Of course, he needed a reason and an excuse to kill. Fortunately, someone gave him just that when he needed it. Xianxia glanced at all of them and said, Firstly, I'm not the one asking all of you to let me remove the poison you suffer from, and it's all of you who are seeking my help. All of you have to remember that. Besides that, all of you should be aware of the conditions I ask for, to remove the poison within your bodies. I don't wish for anyone to bargain with me because I don't have the time for that. Understand? Now, anyone who regrets coming here can leave right now. Leave? The corners of their mouths twitched. How could any one of them dare to leave with those headless corpses on the ground? Xianxia nodded when he saw no one leave, and then he said, Then let's begin. All of them hesitated briefly, and then one of them was the first to step forward. Xianxia nodded, and then the nether ghost flame appeared with a flick of his finger. A miserable and shrill cry suddenly resounded, and it caused the expressions of everyone to change simultaneously. For hours later, Xianxia instantly heaved a sigh of relief when the poison within the last assassin had been cleared away by the nether ghost flame. Controlling the nether ghost flame to remove the poison from their bodies wasn't a simple job because he had to be careful and couldn't make even the slightest mistake. After all, any mistake would end up in the person turning into ash. Xianxia put the nether ghost flame away, and then he gazed at them. At this moment, they revealed undisguised joy. The poison had been removed, and it meant that they wouldn't be controlled by their enemies anymore. Even though they still had to suffer the control of another, it was only for 10 years, and it was only an instant to them. Xianxia flipped his palm, and then a few scrolls and a spatial ring appeared in his palm. He passed them to Leng Jun, and then he said, These scrolls are some Earth-rank cultivation techniques and combat techniques, whereas the spatial ring contains 50,000 energy stones. Your task right now isn't to kill for me, but to work hard and improve your strengths. Even though their movement techniques and assassination techniques were very formidable, the strengths of these assassins were too low in the end. Especially at the ancient battlefield where all the monstrous geniuses gathered. Presently, the ancient battlefield was filled with his enemies, and coupled with the fact that the little fellow had left, he would definitely be in an extremely bad situation if he didn't possess some formidable assistance. So, he didn't hesitate to give them the cultivation techniques and combat techniques that he'd plundered from others. Because the stronger these assassins were, the more helpful they would be to him. Leng Jun was stunned as he gazed at the scrolls and spatial ring in his hand. Isn't he a little too generous? Earth-rank cultivation techniques, Earth-rank combat techniques, and 50,000 energy stones. My God! Leng Jun couldn't maintain his composure anymore. The others in the surroundings were stunned as well, because Xianxia's generosity had truly surprised them. They originally thought that Xianxia might ask them to kill someone or make them into tools to accumulate wealth. Never had they imagined that Yang Yi would actually give them resources and ask them to cultivate. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment before he flipped his palm once more, and then 10 ice soul fruits appeared in his hand. All the others couldn't maintain their calm when the ice soul fruits appeared here. It was especially so for Leng Jun and Leng Yin. Both of them stared fixedly at the ice soul fruits in Yang Ye's hand while their entire bodies had started to tremble. If it wasn't out of consideration for Yang Ye's strength, then they would have probably been unable to refrain from trying to seize it from Yang Yi. They naturally recognized the ice soul fruits. It was a fruit that could provide one with 10 years of cultivation. 10 years. If they were able to eat one of the ice soul fruits, then they could instantly attain the 9th rank of the King Realm. Leng Jun revealed a flattering smile and said, Boss? Feel free to provide me with your instructions if you need anything. I'm willing to risk my life to carry out my duty. We're willing to risk our lives to carry out our duty as well. The others spoke simultaneously as well. The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched. In the end, the ice soul fruit works much better. Yang Yi shook his head, and then he tossed them to Leng Jun and said, You and Leng Jun eat one of these each. As for the rest, distribute 2 every 15 days. As for who it's distributed to, give it to whoever that improves the fastest. Understand? Leng Jun nodded repeatedly as he held the ice soul fruits. At this moment, only the ice soul fruit remained in his eyes. Can you not act so embarrassingly? It's just a fruit. Do you have to act like that? If you do well in leading them, then you can have as many of these fruits as you want, said Yang Yi. Really? Leng Jun raised his head to look at Yang Yi as he spoke with disbelief. Yang Yi flipped his palm, and then 2 more fruits appeared in his palm. He waved them at Leng Jun and said, What do you think? Leng Jun gulped down a mouthful of saliva, and then he said, I'll be following you from now onward. As soon as he finished speaking, Leng Jun turned around to gaze at the others and said, What the fuck are all of you looking at? Have you not seen an ice soul fruit in your lives? All of you are embarrassing. From now onward, we're splitting up. All of you work hard on your cultivations. I don't care what methods all of you use, but those at the King Realm must attain the 5th rank at least in the shortest amount of time possible. Even if you die of exhaustion, all of you at the 1st Heaven Realm must advance to the King Realm. Otherwise, just fucking kill yourselves. Don't waste out cultivation resources because all of us have a huge debt of blood to avenge. Yes, all of them nodded simultaneously. Leng Jun didn't have such great prestige in their hearts before all of this, and it was even to the extent that some didn't even take him seriously. But they weren't idiots, and they'd noticed Yang Ye's attitude towards Leng Jun. They knew that Yang Yi was controlling them through Leng Jun, but it was fine because it was only for 10 years. Moreover, they would be supported by a wealthy fellow like Yang Yi during those 10 years, so they would naturally not refuse. Yang Yi glanced at them and said, I, Yang Yi, keep my word. I'll return your freedom in 10 years from now. However, allow me to be frank in advance. If anyone disobeys me during this period of 10 years, then I'll make living worse than death for you. When he spoke up to here, Yang Yi paused for a moment and said, I know that your movement techniques are extremely good. However, don't offend those profounders in the ancient battlefield for now. Some of their strengths are beyond all of your imaginations. Now, all of you only have to do a single thing, and that's to become stronger and stronger. Understand? They replied in unison. Yes. Yang Yi nodded, and then he gazed at Leng Jun and said, How should I contact all of you when I need to? Leng Jun frowned and spoke in a low voice. We used arrows in the past, but we've left the League of Doom now, so we naturally can't use that anymore. So, I don't know how we should keep in contact. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment, and then he said, Then we'll use transmission talismans. My transmission talismans are at the high grade, so I can contact all of you within a distance of 500 kilometers. Leng Jun's eyelids twitched when he heard this. He's filthy rich. He even has transmission talismans. Moreover, they're at the high grade. Leng Jun and the others left, and they left with half of Yang Ye's wealth. It naturally hurt slightly for Yang Yi, especially those energy stones. After all, he'd wasted a few 10,000 energy stones because of the problem he encountered with the tiny vortex before this. Now, he'd give Lung Jun and the others another 50,000. In other words, he only had less than 20,000 with him. Fortunately, he had 10 top-grade energy stones in his possession, and he'd been unwilling to use them until now because they were truly too precious. Moreover, he might have other uses for them in the future. Alas! Looks like I have to work hard on plundering more. Xianxia sighed on the spot, and then he turned to gaze at a tree and said, "Since you've come, then show yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia walked out slowly from behind the tree. She glanced at Xianxia and said, "I wasn't following you. I was just—" Xianxia smiled and interrupted her. "You don't have to explain. I understand." The corners of Xianxia's mouth curled up slightly. Her smile hadn't spread fully when she hurriedly restrained it, and then she said with a calm expression, "Those fellows with extremely shocking movement techniques were assassins, right?" Xianxia didn't conceal it from her. He nodded and said, "Indeed. Even you know that I have a huge number of enemies here, so I have to get some help, right?" "What exactly do you intend to do?" asked Xianxia. Xianxia grinned and said, "I'm a very fair person. I treat people how they treat me. Actually, I treat the demon race, the devil race, the nether race, and the human race equally. So long as they don't offend me, then I won't offend them. Unfortunately, no matter which race it is, all of them want to kill me. Since it's like that, then I can only give an eye for an eye. If they can't kill me, then I'll kill all of them." Xianxia's expression changed as she spoke in a heavy voice. "You intend to go against the entire devil race, the nether race, the demon race, and the human race?" Xianxia shook his head and said, "Do you think they would let me live if I didn't go against them? They won't. Everyone is like that. The more you shrink back and act weakly, the further they will push. So, it's not I who wants to go against them, and it's they who want to go against me. Since it's like that, then I, Xianxia, will kill to my heart's content." "Can you even kill them all?" asked Xianxia in a low voice. Xianxia revealed a vicious smile on his face, and a wisp of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He said, "I'll kill as many as possible." Previous chapter when Xianxia and Xianxia arrived once more before the entrance to the Nether God's tomb. This place was covered in corpses. Over 90% of them were the corpses of human profounders. All of them had perished rather miserably and horrifyingly because their flesh, bleed, and souls had been completely sucked away, and only an extremely shriveled-up corpse remained. Xianxia glanced indifferently at all of this, and then he said, "Let's go." He would naturally feel no pity for these humans. What a joke. Would they feel pity for him if he was dead? If he really was dead, then these humans would probably be the ones who laughed with the most delight. Xianxia nodded, and then she walked towards the entrance. Even though she felt slight pity towards them, that was all she felt. After all, they weren't related to her at all. In the end, it was still the same principle. Since they dared to come to the ancient battlefield and the ninth hell, then they should have been prepared for death. In this place, the strong lived while the weak perished. Since they were weak yet still insisted on coming, then who could they blame but themselves? At the moment that Xianxia and Xianxia walked through the entrance, 2 rays of cold lights had shot violently at them from both sides. Xianxia was about to act when Xianxia's wrist shook slightly, and then a cold glow flashed. After that, 2 miserable and shrill cries suddenly resounded. Xianxia looked over towards the source of the voices, and he saw 2 human profounders gazing at them with astounded and terrified expressions. Both of them were still alive, but each of them had lost a right arm to Xianxia, and their blood was still spraying out like a fountain. The reason they still hadn't fled was that Xianxia's saber intent had locked onto them. Fleeing now was equivalent to death. "Who are the 2 of you?" asked Xianxia in a low voice. They were about to speak when Xianxia spoke before them. "They're here to rob others, of course. They're keeping watch at the entrance to the tomb so that they can launch a surprise attack when others enter. Even profounders that are slightly stronger than them would probably suffer death before their surprise attacks. Am I right?" Their expressions changed, and then one of them gazed at Xianxia and said, "Friend, don't listen to his nonsense. We brothers are from the 6th rank sect of the Central Territory, the Unclear Sect. The reason we attacked the two of you was that we thought you were members of the other races. If we knew that you were human profounders, then we would have definitely not attacked." Xianxia loosened the grip on her saber when she heard this, and her expression eased up. The two of them were delighted when they noticed this, and the other one of pair disregarded the pain from his severed arm and hurriedly said, "I presume both of you are genius disciples from 9th rank sects since you possessed such formidable strengths, right? We brothers." This person had merely spoken up to hear when a strand of pale violet light flashed abruptly, and then his head flew into the air. "You!" The other fellow gazed at Xianxia with horror. However, another ray of light flashed, and then his head flew off as well. After he killed the two of them, Xianxia waved his right hand, and the spatial rings in their possessions had instantly flown into his palm. Meanwhile, Xianxia gazed at Xianxia and asked in a calm voice, "Why?" Xianxia naturally knew what she was asking about. He immediately grinned and said, "Look at the corpses in the surroundings. Are the human corpses more numerous or the corpses of the other races?" Xianxia glanced at the surroundings when she heard this. There were almost 100 corpses around them, and over 90% of these corpses belonged to humans. Xianxia frowned. Obviously, she'd come to an understanding. Meanwhile, Xianxia waved the spatial rings in his hand, and then he said, "I've just looked through them. There are an entire 15,000 plus energy stones within the spatial ring, and there are countless assorted things in there as well. Obviously, they'd obtained all of that through robbing others. They'd only spoken those words just now because they wanted you to spare their lives." When he spoke up to hear, Xianxia suddenly smiled and said, "Actually, I would still kill them even if they were only targeting members of the other races." "Why?" Xianxia was puzzled. "Because we've contracted enmity with them." Xianxia smiled and said, "You've severed their arms, so do you think they wouldn't harbor any resentment towards you? Perhaps you would believe it. But while they seem to be extremely respectful and devoid of any resentment, I guarantee that they probably wish for nothing more than to torture us to death. Enemies aren't terrifying, but it's terrifying when they're in the shadows. So, once enmity has been contracted, it's best to destroy it at the roots." Xianxia glanced at Xianxia, and then she shook her head and said, "I don't know what you've encountered in the past that made your character become like this, and I can't say that you're wrong as well. However, I feel that acting in that way is too extreme. Moreover, it'll make countless enemies for you. After all, the benevolent have no enemies." "The benevolent have no enemies?" Xianxia shook his head and smiled, and then he said, "Those words are true. The benevolent have to help others more. Unfortunately, I'll never be someone benevolent." Xianxia frowned and said, "Why?" "Because I'm going to kill a huge amount of people." Xianxia twisted his wrist, and his sword left an afterimage behind as it moved. He said, "I'll make all those who harm or betray me or my loved ones pay with their lives." When he recalled the scene he witnessed with the space mirror, Xianxia instantly emanated a strand of extremely ferocious slaughter sword intent. Moreover, his eyes gradually turned crimson red, and it was like an ocean of blood resided within his eyes. Xianxia's expression changed. However, right at this moment, the crimson red in Xianxia's eyes slowly vanished, and the ferocious sword intent slowly returned into his body. Xianxia took a deep breath, and then his brows knit together tightly, because he'd noticed a serious problem, and that was his slaughter sword intent was capable of overwhelming him with the intent to slaughter. At that moment just now, he actually had the feeling to annihilate everyone in the world. If he didn't possess the enlightened sword heart, then he would have already become a machine of slaughter right now. The slaughter sword intent can be said to be the sharpest and fierce amongst sword intent, because the stronger your killing intent is, the greater its might will be. Especially when you've killed a huge amount of people, the boundless killing intent wouldn't just make you lose all reason, it can even affect the mind of your opponents. It can be said that the stronger your killing intent is, the stronger your slaughter sword intent would be. Xianxia spoke in a heavy voice. However, it has an extremely huge flaw as well. If you're unable to control your killing intent, then you'll be controlled by it. You should know what the consequence of being controlled by your killing intent is. Xianxia nodded and said, I'll pay attention to that in the future, and I'll try my best to avoid utilizing it if I can. Xianxia nodded and said, the greatest taboo of those who cultivate in the sword and saber is being controlled by your own weapon. Because if you're controlled by your own weapon, then you're not you anymore. Xianxia said seriously, I understand. Xianxia shook her head slightly, and then she said, let's go. There are numerous souls within this place, and they're extremely beneficial to you. As soon as she finished speaking, Xianxia started walking forward. Xianxia hurriedly followed her. Xianxia was ceaselessly sizing up the tomb as he traveled. Instead of calling this place a tomb, it could really be called an enormous city. But this city was completely empty, and it was filled with bone-piercingly cold winds. Moreover, green balls of light would occasionally appear on its streets. The green balls of light here were much larger than those outside the tomb. Just as Xianxia had said, the energy within them was even purer, and this made Xianxia extremely delighted, because he'd absorbed over 100 green balls of light all along the way. However, he was puzzled by the fact that Xianxia refused these green balls of light, and she gave everything they obtained to him. This made him feel very uncomfortable. It was naturally all thanks to Xianxia that Xianxia was able to absorb so many souls in such a short period of just 2 hours. Because Xianxia seemed to know where they were, so they found an unusually huge amount all along the way. After he absorbed another green ball of light, Xianxia took a deep breath while a wisp of happiness flashed in his eyes, because he sensed that his sword intent seemed to have arrived at the peak of the 6th level. Moreover, he felt that it had become even purer. It could be said that while he was still at the 6th level of sword intent, his sword intent was absolutely not weaker than Mo Qingyu, because he possessed slaughter sword intent. Your sword intent is about to break through? Asked Xianxia. Xianxia nodded. He hesitated for a moment before he flipped his palm, and then 5 ice soul fruits and a top-grade energy tone appeared in his palm. He passed them to her and said, you said that those souls aren't very helpful to your current saber intent, so I'll believe you for now. However, these ice soul spirit fruits and this top-grade energy stone should be useful to you, right? Xianxia was about to speak when Xianxia continued. We can only split apart if you continue to refuse it. After all, I'm not so shameless to continuously take advantage of you. Is there any need to treat me like such an outsider? Xianxia glanced at Xianxia with a slightly displeased expression, and then she seemed to feel that her attitude could be slightly misinterpreted. So her expression slowly turned cold while she looked away. Xianxia was stunned by this, and then he shook his head and said, I'm not treating you like an outsider. I'm only giving them to you because I feel that they're helpful to you. Just like how you are giving me the souls because you feel that they're helpful to me. Xianxia's face eased up when she heard Xiangyi's explanation, and then she glanced at Xianxia before she took the ice soul fruits and energy stone from Xianxia. Suddenly, she frowned as she carefully sized up the ice soul fruits. After that, she said, I've consumed ice soul fruits in the past, but they seem to be slightly different from these. What's different about them? Asked Xianxia with a frown on his face. Xianxia pondered deeply for a moment before she said, the energy contained with these ice soul fruits are at least 10 times purer than the ice soul fruit I consumed in the past. Are you sure they are ice soul fruits? 10 times. Xianxia was shocked, and he said, how could that be possible? Xianxia was just about to say something, but right at this moment, a strand of violet light flashed, and then an ice soul fruit in Xianxia's palm had suddenly vanished. Xianxia's expression changed while killing intent flashed in her eyes. However, right at this moment, she suddenly heard Xianxia cry out loudly with excitement while seeming as if he'd gone mad. Little fellow! A strand of violet light flashed, and then the violet mink appeared in front of Xianxia. The violet mink stared fixedly at Xianxia while she held the ice soul fruit with her claws. Her lively violet eyes were gradually filled with glistening droplets of water. Xianxia's head hurt when he saw the violet mink in such a state, and he stretched out his hand to embrace the violet mink. He rubbed his chin against her furry little head as he said in a gentle voice, "Little fellow, what are you doing here?" The violet mink's place in Xianxia's heart could truly be described as irreplaceable. It could be said that even Xianxia couldn't compare to the violet mink, because only the little fellow had accompanied him all the way through life and death. In Xianxia's opinion, he could betray the heavens, he could betray the earth, and he could even betray the world. However, he would absolutely not betray the little fellow. The violet mink rubbed her head against Xianxia's chin, and then she raised her head to gaze at Xianxia before she started gesticulating with her little claws. After a short while, Xianxia understood what the little fellow meant, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He said, "You're saying that you snuck out again?" The violet mink nodded, and then she revealed a brilliant smile. Xianxia laughed bitterly, and then he rubbed the little fellow's head and said, "Do you know that your imperial father and mother will be worried about you?" At this moment he was extremely moved in his heart. He knew that besides, because the little fellow was reluctant to leave his side. The other reason why the little fellow had snuck out was that she was worried about him. After all, he had countless enemies now. Right at this moment, Xianxia asked in a low voice, "It is a spatial mink?" Xianxia nodded, and then he asked, "You know the little fellow's clansman?" Xianxia glanced at Xianxia with a strange gaze upon seeing Xianxia nod towards her, and then she glanced at the violet mink and said, "Why is it with you? And it's even so close to you." At this moment, Xianxia was extremely shocked. She naturally knew of the spatial minks. Even her clan and father were extremely fearful of this terrifying clan. However, she'd never imagined that she would actually see a spatial mink being so close to a human. After all, the demon race had always been hostile and looked down upon the human race. Xianxia grinned and said, "That's a long story. I'll tell you about it slowly in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, he lowered his head to look at the little fellow and said, "Little fellow, since you've come, then how about we fight the extraordinary geniuses of the various territories together?" The violet mink's eyes lit up, and then she swiftly nodded, because she loved fighting and plundering the most. Xianxia roared with laughter, and then he held the little fellow in his arms as he flashed towards the depths of the tomb. Xianxia remained silent for a moment, and then her figure flashed to follow behind him. Not long after Xianxia, the violet mink, and Xianxia left, the space at the spot where they stood earlier had suddenly warped, and then a man and woman appeared there. They were none other than the Mink Emperor and Demon Empress who had stopped the little fellow from being together with Xianxia. The Demon Empress asked with a low voice while she gazed at the direction that Xianxia and the violet mink had vanished towards, "Is he really the Undertaker's disciple?" The Mink Emperor nodded and said, "It should be true." When he spoke up to hear, the Mink Emperor's expression suddenly turned solemn as he said, "This kid is slightly mysterious. I've tried to discover the path his destiny takes in the future, but I failed to obtain any information because his future is completely hazy. Nothing can be seen of it. You're actually unable to discern the destiny of a king realm profounder with your strength?" asked the Demon Empress with a frown on her face. "No one in this world can discern his future." Right at this moment, a third voice suddenly resounded here, and then a middle-aged man who wore a luxurious robe appeared mysteriously in front of the Demon Empress and Mink Emperor. The middle-aged man was handsome. His long hair hung loosely on his shoulders while he held a string of violet-colored prayer beads in his hand, and his entire body emanated an indifferent and extraordinary. However, his eyes were covered by a white cloth. Their expressions changed slightly when they saw this middle-aged man. It wasn't because this middle-aged man's sudden appearance here, and it was instead because of what the middle-aged man had said. They would have naturally maintained their composure if it was anyone else who'd spoken such words, but it was different when it was said by this middle-aged man, because this middle-aged man was the seer of this present age. What did this title represent? It represented the ability to discern the secrets of the heavens and predict the future. Perhaps the strengths of those who held this title had never been very formidable throughout the past, but their ability of prediction was unrivaled. However, at this moment, the The seer of this age had said that no one could discern the future of a king realm profounder. Xianxia, what do you mean? The demon empress said in a low voice. Even you're unable to see through his future? Xianxia shook his head and said, his past and future are concealed by a mysterious force. Even I'm unable to see through his future. Then will following him bring fortune or misfortune to Zier? The demon empress was slightly displeased. Xianxia smiled and said, Demon empress? It's actually not important anymore. You ought to be aware of the outcome that awaits all of us if the heaven path is still obstructed 100 years from now. But Zier is a violet-eyed spatial mink that rarely appear every few 10,000 years, the demon empress said in a low voice. With her natural endowment and talent, she may not necessarily be unable to possess the ability to pass through a boundary in 100 years from now. But what if she fails? Asked Xianxia. The demon empress's expression changed, and then she fell silent. Have the two of you noticed? Meanwhile, Xianxia said abruptly, just like that little girl of mine, the destiny of everyone by that kid's side has started to gradually change. The mink emperor and demon empress's expressions changed simultaneously. Ha ha! Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly laughed lightly, and he laughed for a while before he said, the secrets of the heavens! The secrets of the heavens. Discerning the secrets of the heavens has made every single generation of my Xiao clan pay a heavy price. I originally thought that it would end with me, and I would be able to make the heavens show mercy to my Xiao clan. However, I never expected that Xier would still have to pay a price. But fortunately, the heavens didn't sentence her to death and gave her a chance to survive. Ha ha! After Xianxia left, the demon empress said in a heavy voice, I still don't want Zier to be by the side of a human. She actually threatened us with her life when we took her back by force this time. I think that Zier might have fallen for that kid. If they continue staying together, then I'm afraid. The mink emperor laughed bitterly and said, but what can we do about it? I feel very fortunate that I didn't kill that kid on that day. Otherwise, she would probably never forgive me. Alas, I'm worried about Zier's betrothal with that kid from the ancient Void Dragon clan. Hao Tian. That kid has already attained the spirit rank now. Humph. Since he dared to steal Zier's heart, then he can think of a way himself. The demon empress grunted coldly. The demon emperor laughed bitterly when he heard this. And then he waved his hand, causing the space in front of them to warp before both of them vanished on the spot. The further they went into the tomb, the stronger the bone-piercing cold winds were. This made Yang Yi feel increasingly excited and delighted because it represented that they were getting closer and closer to the 9th Hell Cold Gale. He'd personally experienced how formidable the Nether Ghost Flame was, so how could the 9th Hell Cold Gale that was similarly natural treasure be any weaker? If he was able to subdue the 9th Hell Cold Gale, then his strength would definitely improve greatly. At that time, he would really have the confidence and trump cards to go against the various monstrous geniuses of the entire continent. Of course, most importantly, he could take revenge on Mo Qingyu. Suddenly, Xiao Yushi stopped moving, and she gazed at the luxurious buildings that were like palaces in the distance and said, This is the Nether God's tomb. Bang! Right at this moment, an enormous bang suddenly resounded, and then the entire palace trembled. It's Mo Ku. Xiao Yushi revealed a solemn expression and said, He has actually utilized devil energy. Yang Yi frowned and was just about to ask what devil energy was. However, roaring laughter suddenly resounded from the palace, and then a few figures flashed out from within it. Yang Yi decisively pulled back Xiao Yushi, who was about to move forward, and hid at the side. After all, he loved to reap the benefits without any effort. Xiao Yushi's figure stiffened when Yang Yi held her hand, and then she blushed. She was just about to struggle free from Yang Ye's grasp when he said, Their enemy is definitely an extremely formidable fellow, since that fellow was able to make Mo Ku angry. If we charge out now, then it's very likely for Mo Ku and those fellows from the Nether Territory to deal with us first. Even though we aren't afraid of them, it isn't necessary to show ourselves now. Let go of my hand first. Xiao Yushi blushed as she glared at Yang Yi and spoke with an embarrassed and furious tone. Hand? Yang Yi was stunned and said, "What hand? You're holding my hand." Xiao Yushi glared at Yang Yi with a blush on her face. If it wasn't because she was afraid of harming Yang Yi, she would have even used her saber. Yang Yi lowered his head to have a look when he heard this, and then he noticed that he was actually holding on forcefully to her hand. Yang Yi hurriedly let go of her and smiled with embarrassment. He said, I was too agitated just now, so I held it a bit too tightly. Don't take offense, all right?" Xiao Yushi glared at Yang Yi, and then she turned her head away and fell silent. The atmosphere here instantly became slightly embarrassing. After a short while passed, Yang Yi was just about to say something when Xiao Yushi suddenly said, "It's useless. With the strengths they possess, they'll be able to sense us as soon as they come close." "Don't worry." Yang Yi smiled, and then he patted the violet mink on its head. The violet mink understood his attentions, and she waved her little claw, causing them to be instantly enveloped by a barrier of violet light. "What's this?" said Xiao Yushi with a puzzled expression. "I don't know as well," Yang Yi said. "In any case, even a spirit realm expert wouldn't be able to notice us while we're enveloped by this thing, because it seems to be capable of isolating our auras." Xiao Yushi glanced at the violet mink, and then she remained silent. "Haha! As expected of the most monstrous genius in the devil race for the last 1,000 years and the existence who's most likely to become the devil god. You were actually able to fight me, Mu Jun, equally with the fist. Interesting. Interesting. Haha. Previous chapter, it's Mu Jun." Meanwhile, Xiao Yushi's expression turned solemn when she heard the roaring laughter from within the palace. "You know him?" asked Yang Yi. She nodded and said, "He's the crown prince of Exalted Han Empire in the Central Territory. Perhaps you haven't heard of it. Let me explain it in this way. The forces of the Exalted Han Empire aren't inferior to a 9th rank sect or hidden clan, because since the continent was split apart. No, I should say that it existed since before the continent was split apart. The history of its existence is even older than any 9th rank sect. Which one is stronger when compared to the Southern Territory's Grand Qin Empire?" asked Yang Yi in a low voice. "They can't be compared at all." Xiao Yushi shook her head and said, "Do you know? There's an army of 100,000 in the Central Territory, and they are called Soul Eater. Even the 9th rank sects and hidden clans are extremely fearful of this army because every single member of the army is at least at the spirit realm." Yang Yi exclaimed, 100,000 spirit realm troops? Xiao Yushi nodded and said, "That's merely its strength that's revealed on the surface, and its hidden forces are probably even more shocking." Yang Yi shook his head and laughed bitterly. 100,000 troops are merely their forces on the surface. Exactly how strong is the Exalted Han Empire? Meanwhile, she suddenly said, "Something worthy of mentioning is that the Sword Sect's founding ancestor had once entered into conflict with the Exalted Han Empire 10,000 years ago." "What happened?" Yang Yi was instantly interested because a conflict between the #1 expert on the continent and the Exalted Han Empire was absolutely a brilliant story. Xiao Yushi glanced at him and said, "The Sword Sect's founding ancestor fought his way to the throne room of the palace with just his sword in hand, and the Exalted Han Empire was utterly embarrassed. In the end, it had no choice but to activate its defensive grand formation. However, the formation was still destroyed by the Sword Sect's founding ancestor. So, 3 supreme elders of the Exalted Han Empire who were living in seclusion had no choice but to emerge once more into the world. What happened after that?" Yang Yi pursued an answer impatiently. "Then Sword Sect's founding ancestor retreated," said Xiao Yushi. "He lost." Yang Yi was astounded. She shook her head and said, "No, but he didn't win as well, because those 3 supreme elders gathered the faith energy of the entire empire to resist the Sword Sect's founding ancestor. The strength of an entire empire coupled with almost 100 Monarch Realm experts and 3 Saint Realm experts. Even the Sword Sect's founding ancestor, who was invincible throughout the world, could only retreat temporarily. However, he'd still killed a Supreme Elder and the Emperor of the Exalted Han Empire before he retreated. 100 Monarch Realm experts and 3 Saint Realm experts. Yang Yi gulped down a mouthful of saliva. Aren't such resources and reserves a little too terrifying? Xiao Yushi nodded and said, it was also that battle which allowed the world to witness how terrifying the exalted Han Empire was. Besides the spatial Mink clan, only the exalted Han Empire is capable of forcing the Sword Sect's founding ancestor to retreat. Exactly how strong was the Sword Sect's founding ancestor all those years ago? A wisp of a ruthless expression flashed in Yang Ye's eyes. If I possessed strength like his, then would my mother be imprisoned and suffering in the Flower Palace? If I had strength like his, then would the little fellow's family stop us from being together? If, to a certain degree, possessing strength was equivalent to possessing everything in this world. Bang! 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 Meanwhile, numerous deafening bangs resounded once more from within the palace. At this moment, Xiao Yushi glanced at Yang Yi and said, if you fight Mu Jun in the future, then remember to be careful. When she spoke up to hear, she paused for a moment and continued. Actually, you have to be careful when you fight anyone here, because you have no advantage against anyone. After all, their natural talents aren't inferior to your own while their background is infinitely better than yours. They don't have to worry about cultivation techniques and combat techniques at all. Yet you... Yang Yi smiled and said, I know. I don't have the slightest advantage when facing them, so I must madly improve my strength. Bang! Right when Xiao Yushi was about to say something, a world-shaking bang resounded abruptly, and then the palace exploded beneath their solemn gazes to reveal the people within the palace. Yang Yi knew all of them. The three outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory stood on the left while a young man in a golden robe embroidered with a dragon was standing in front of the three geniuses. On the other hand, Moku, Hanyu, and Inglong were standing on the right. At this moment, Moku revealed a slightly savage expression, and his body even emanated countless strands of horrifying black-colored devil energy. The gold-robed young man who stood facing Moku had a slightly solemn expression as well, while layers of golden air effused out from him. If one looked closely at this air, one would notice that it was a golden dragon. There was a stone sarcophagus between their groups, and a completely dark and devilish spear that emanated a chilly and deathly aura floated above it. Xiao Yushi spoke in a low voice. The Nether God's spear. Yang Yi hurriedly asked, what rank is it? He wasn't interested in treasures beneath the heaven rank. Actually, it wasn't that he wasn't interested, but it wasn't worth going head-to-head with these fellows for something below the heaven rank. It has no rank. Xiao Yushi shook her head and said, this spear has a special characteristic. It grows stronger according to its owner, because it possesses an almost boundless strength. The amount of strength within it that is activated depends completely upon its owner. Moku wants that spear? Asked Yang Yi. She nodded and said, it should be like that. If he's able to obtain that spear, then he'll be able to instantly activate 30% of its strength. At that time, besides a few people, there would probably be no one capable of resisting a single strike of his spear. Yang Yi stated immediately, he can't be allowed to obtain it. Moku's strength was already formidable to the extreme. So, if he was allowed to obtain this spear, then how terrifying would his strength be? Xiao Yushi nodded in agreement, and then she said, that's exactly what Mu Jun and the others are thinking. So, they took action to stop Moku. As Yang Yi and Xiao Yushi spoke softly, both of them hadn't noticed that the little fellow's large eyes had instantly lit up when she saw the Nether God's spear, and a faint violet glow flickered into appearance on its little claw. Moku gazed at Mu Jun with a gloomy expression as he said, as expected of the next emperor of the exalted Han Empire, your imperial energy is already pure to the point of taking the form of a dragon. You're not bad yourself. Mu Jun smiled and said, you're actually completely fine after you suffered a strike from my King Path Fist. If I'm not wrong, you're the only successor to become the next Devil Lord. Right? Moku didn't answer Mu Jun. He turned around to gaze at Hanyu before he said, I know you hid your strength earlier. Help me obtain the Nether God's spear. And I, Moku, promise that I'll definitely do my best to help you obtain the Nether God's inheritance. I'll do as I've said. What do you think? Han Yu's brows raised as he asked in a low voice. Really? Imoku stated. Of course. Hee hee. Han Yu laughed gloomily, and then a pitch-black chain instantly appeared in front of him. He said, I'll help you hold off 2 of those 3 geniuses from the Central Territory. Deal with the rest yourself. If you can't, then I can't do anything about it. Imoku nodded, and then he turned to gaze at Long and said, Help me this time and I'll give the first scroll of the heavenly devil physique to you. You're willing to do that? A wisp of excitement appeared in Long's eyes. Do I have a choice? Ha ha. Long roared with laughter, and then his figure shook. He returned to his original form and shot into the sky before his vital energy locked onto Mu Jun and the others. You'll deal with 2 of us on your own? Meanwhile, Shiluo suddenly stepped forward, and he gazed at Han Yu as he said, A freak who's neither man nor ghost like you actually dares to speak about fighting 2 of us on your own? Are you sure you brought your brain out with you today? If you didn't, then I can help you look for it. As soon as he finished speaking, an axe appeared in his hand. Wouldn't you know if I did or didn't by giving it a try yourself? Han Yu said in a cold voice, Do you really think the 3 of you are extraordinary? Today, I'll allow the 3 of you to witness what a true monstrous genius is like. As soon as he finished speaking, Han Yu issued a command in his heart, and the nether chain in his hand instantly pierced through space and attacked Shiluo. Bring it on, Shiluo shouted, and then he swiftly chopped at the chain with his axe. As he watched Shiluo and Han Yu battle, Mu Jun pondered deeply for a moment before he said, Miss Nangong, I'll be troubling you to lend Shiluo a hand. Nangong Meng frowned and said, Yeah, are you doubting Shiluo's strength? Mu Jun shook his head and said, I'm not doubting his strength, and it's because Han Yu had concealed his strength. If I'm not wrong, then he might have comprehended night intent. If it's at any other ordinary time, Shiluo would be able to retreat unharmed even if he lost to Han Yu. However, we're in the Nether God's tomb right now, so the slightest mistake might cause Shiluo to be heavily injured. Night intent. Nangong Meng was shocked and said, How could that be possible? Nothing is impossible. Mu Jun said in a low voice, Look at Han Yu's figure. Even though he's concealing it with all his might, his figure is unconsciously fusing into one with the darkness of night. So, the slightest mistake from Shiluo would make him suffer a huge loss. You should be aware of what the consequences of being heavily injured in the ancient battlefield are. Nangong Meng gazed at Han Yu for a short while before she finally stopped hesitating. Her figure flashed through space and joined the battle between Shiluo and Han Yu. Shiluo frowned when he saw Nangong Meng lend him a hand. He was just about to speak when Nangong Meng spoke before him. Cut the crap. Let's join forces and kill this freak first. Shiluo was instantly delighted when he heard this. All right, Meng, we're a couple that's of one heart. If 2 people are of the same mind, then they can cut through anything. Ha ha. As he spoke, his figure shot explosively towards Han Yu. Nangong Meng was speechless. Li Qingshui instantly entered into battle with Long as well, and then only Imoku and Mu Jun remained. Bring it on. Mu Jun smiled as he spoke. As you wish. The devil energy throughout Imoku's body instantly erupted explosively. However, right at this moment, a strand of violet light flashed, and then the Nether God's spear vanished before the gazes of Mu Jun and Imoku. At the same time, the violet mink who was hiding in the shadows was holding the Nether God's spear, which was a few times larger than her. After being stunned for a moment, the first thought that came into Xianxia's mind was, We're in huge trouble. On the other hand, the corners of Xiao Yushi's mouth couldn't help but twitch. The violet mink held the extremely long Nether God's spear in her little claws, and it seemed rather laughable when their figures were compared. She sized it up briefly before she passed it to Xiangyi, and then she revealed an extremely brilliant smile. Obviously, she felt that they had another treasure in their possession. Xiangyi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Actually, he wasn't interested in the Nether God's spear because he utilized the sword. Moreover, it was like a hot potato right now. Whoever who possessed it would suffer the frenzied attacks of Imoku's group of 3. His target was the ninth Hell-Cold Gale, and he'd never aroused any desire to possess the Nether God's spear. Moreover, he didn't want to offend too many formidable enemies before he obtained the ninth Hell-Cold Gale. However, since he'd obtained it now, then it was definitely impossible to make him hand it over for nothing. The violet mink clearly hadn't noticed what her actions represented. At this moment, she passed the Nether God's spear to Xianxia as if she was presenting a treasure to him, and her round face was covered in a happy smile. The corners of Xianxia's eyes couldn't help but twitch when she saw the violet mink seem so carefree. The Nether God's spear is a good treasure indeed, but can't you just seize it like that? Now, all of them who were originally in intense battle have stopped fighting and are looking towards us now. Xianxia glanced at the violet mink, and then she glanced at Xianxia before her left hand moved slowly to the hilt of her saber. Xianxia took a deep breath, and then he smiled to the violet mink before he held the Nether God's spear in his hand. In an instant, a strand of strange energy shot over from within the spear and assaulted his body and sea of consciousness. Xianxia grunted coldly as his sword intent surged out and instantly suppressed that strand of energy. As he held the Nether God's spear in his hand, Xianxia's figure flashed and arrived in front of Moku and the others. It wasn't that he didn't want to flee, but it was impossible for them to flee right now, because Mu Jun, Moku, and the others had encircled his group. If they were to try and flee now, then they would face the joint attack of the best monstrous geniuses on Profounder Continent. Even though Xianxia was confident in his ability, he wasn't confident to the point fighting all of them by himself. Meanwhile, a wave of faint fragrance assaulted his nose. Xianxia swiftly turned his head towards its source and noticed Xianxia had appeared by his side. Xianxia's heart felt warm when he noticed this, and he said, "Thank you." Xianxia glanced at Xianxia. She didn't say anything and just tightened her grip on the hilt of her saber. Moku's brows instantly knit together tightly when he saw Xianxia, and a dense, puzzled expression arose in his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Your dantian is actually fine?" Han Yu's brows knit together tightly as well. Obviously, Han Yu was similarly unable to understand how Xianxia's dantian could actually recover. After all, the dantian was the foundation of profounders, and it was the weakest and most important part within them. If it were to be destroyed, then it was even more severe than rupturing all the meridians in one's body. Because there is no treasure in the world that can heal the dantian. Do I still need to verify a fact that's right before your eyes? Xianxia chuckled, and then he swung the Nether God's spear about and said, "Moku, you want the spear? Do you want to die a second time?" Moku's eyes narrowed slightly as he spoke in a low voice. "Why don't you come over and give it a try?" Xianxia's brows raised as he spoke. Moku clenched his right fist tightly. Right when he was about to attack, Mu Jun suddenly gazed at Xianxia and smiled as he said, "Not bad. No matter if you're the future Sword Emperor or not. Just this courage of daring to face to next Devil Lord of the Devil Territory is sufficient for you to stride proudly throughout the continent." "You've heard of me?" asked Xianxia as he gazed at Mu Jun. "Who hasn't heard of the Quasi-Sword Emperor?" said Mu Jun with a smile on his face. Xianxia suddenly asked, "You want this spear as well?" Mu Jun was stunned, and then he roared with laughter and said, "Interesting. All right, let's be frank. Tell me your conditions. What can you give me?" Xianxia was instantly interested. The Nether God's spear was like a hot potato, and it was of no use to him as well. If he was able to obtain some treasures that were useful to him and toss this hot potato away, then it naturally couldn't be any better. Meanwhile, Li Qingshui suddenly said, "Xianxia, if I were you, I would take the initiative to hand the Nether God's spear over. You have to think about whether you have the qualifications to bargain with us." "Am I bargaining with you?" Xianxia gazed at Li Qingshui and said, "Please, get off your high horse. All right? As for whether I have the qualifications or not, I really don't know. In any case, all I know is that if I'm willing, then this spear would fall into Moku's hands at any moment. What do you think? You're courting death." Li Qingshui's face turned cold before his figure flashed, and he shot towards Xianxia like a bolt of lightning. However, right at this moment, A strand of cold light flashed before Li Qingshui instantly returned to where he stood earlier. After that, his expression instantly became solemn. He gazed at Xiao Yushi, whom he'd overlooked until now, and said, "Who are you?" Mo Ku and the others had witnessed how formidable Xiao Yushi was, but they still couldn't help but be shocked when they saw her force Li Qingshui back with a single attack. Besides sword cultivators, the most terrifying and difficult to deal with in this world included saber cultivators. Mu Jun glanced at her and asked in a low voice, "Xiao Yushi?" Xiao Yushi glanced at him before she moved to stand behind Yang Yi. Yang Yi nodded lightly to her, and then he gazed at Mu Jun and the others. "Now, can we start our discussion? I know that just the two of us are unable to resist any one of your groups. However, I guarantee that if any one of you dare to attack, then this spear will fall into the other group's hands." Mu Jun's face sank slightly as he said, "Yang Yi, you're a human. Is that so?" Yang Yi shook his head and smiled. "But it seems like most of those who want to kill me are humans. In my opinion, there is no difference between the human race and the other race. There are only friends and enemies, and I'll kill anyone that offends me. As for whether it's someone of the human race, devil race, nether race, or demon race, all of that isn't important to me." When they heard Yang Yi, Mo Ku and the others instantly shot a glance at him, and then their eyes flashed with a wisp of a strange glow. On the other hand, the expressions of Mu Jun and the others turned slightly unsightly. If Yang Yi, no, to be more precise, if Xiao Yushi were to stand on their side, then their forces would definitely be superior to Emoka's group. However, she just so happened to stand by the side of Yang Yi, who didn't care about race at all. Most importantly, Yang Yi intended to extort them, and they had no choice but to let him do it. "I have a body refinement technique." Meanwhile, Mo suddenly said, "It's a low-grade heaven rank technique. I'm willing to provide this cultivation technique to you in exchange for the spear. What do you think?" Low-grade heaven rank? Yang Yi was instantly interested. Even though his physical body was extremely formidable, it was much inferior when compared to Mo Ku and the demon race. The main reason for this was because he didn't possess a good cultivation technique. Otherwise, his physical body would definitely be far more formidable than it was right now. Mu Jun was instantly anxious when he noticed that Yang Yi was interested, and then he didn't hesitate to flip his palm. A golden sword chest appeared in his hands before he said, "This sword chest is called Infinite, and it contained 108 high-grade earth-rank swords. Moreover, every single one of the swords are inscribed with a talisman that increases its strength. You're a sword cultivator, so your strength will definitely instantly rise a few levels if you obtain it." Yang Ye's eyes instantly lit up when he saw the golden sword chest. Even though the 36 profound rank swords in his body had been transformed into earth rank swords by the tiny vortex, he knew that it was practically their limit. After all, the quality of those 36 swords had arrived at a certain level. Moreover, earth rank swords weren't really helpful to him anymore, and only swords at the heaven rank could create a sword formation that was capable of posing a threat to these monstrous geniuses. Yang Yi suppressed the excitement in his heart, and then he shook his head and said, "Both of you should be aware of this spear's value. Is it only worth so little? So, I hope that both of you can be more sincere. Don't try to trick me, otherwise we can only part ways. Even though this spear isn't really useful to me, it wouldn't be bad as a gift." The corners of their mouths twitched when they heard Yang Yi. "A gift? Would you even be willing? I'll add another 100,000 energy stones." Mu Jun spoke in a low voice. "That's my limit. If you're still unsatisfied, then give the spear to Mo Ku. However, I guarantee that even if you do obtain that body refinement technique, you wouldn't have the chance to cultivate it. Even if you have Xiao Yushi's protection. I'm not threatening you, and I'm merely speaking about a fact." "That isn't a threat?" Yang Yi chuckled and said, "Do you know? I hate being threatened, but I can make an exception this time." When he spoke up to hear, he glanced at the violet mink and said, "I know that no matter who I give the spear to, I'll be pursued by the other group. So, I've thought of a method. It's one where both of you give those things to me before I place the spear back, and then you can fight for it yourselves. All right? Do you think we're idiots? Mu Jun's face sank as he said, Now I understand why so many people want to kill you. So you really deserve it. But no one has been able to succeed until now, right? Said Yang Yi with a smile on his face. Are you really that confident? Mu Jun's eyes narrowed slightly and flickered with a ghastly and cold glow. I agree with this method of yours. Meanwhile, Emoka suddenly said, Put it where it was and guarantee that little fellow on your shoulder won't do anything. All right? The violet mink blinked, and then it raised its claw with the intention of waving it at Emoku. Yang Yi hurriedly embraced the little fellow because it wasn't the time to act willfully. After all, they should at least reap the benefits first before they acted willfully. When he heard Emoku, Mu Jun glanced at the violet mink for the first time, and then he frowned. After a short while, his pupils suddenly constricted as he said, A spatial mink! You only noticed now? Yang Yi smiled and said, So what about you? Do you agree? If you don't, then I'll give the spar to Emoku right now, and you can taste the might of this spear in the future. Mu Jun gazed at the violet mink for a short while before he took a deep breath. And then the golden sword chest and a spatial ring flew toward Yang Yi with a swing of his hand. If the spatial mink wasn't here, then he would naturally not make any compromise because he could seize it by force. However, trying to take it by force in the presence of the spatial mink was practically a fucking joke. Emoku swung his hand as well, and a pitch-black scroll flew towards Yang Yi. Yang Yi chuckled when he got these treasures, and then the nether god's spear instantly flew back to the stone sarcophagus with a swing of his hand. However, right at this moment, a strand of green light flashed abruptly, and it was like a bolt of lightning that shot instantly and violently at Yang Yi. I never expected that you would actually be alive. How surprising. However, since it's like that, then I'll make you die again. After the green light flashed here, Mo Qingyu's voice instantly appeared here as well. Yang Ye's eyes instantly narrowed when he heard this voice, and a wisp of ghastly killing intent appeared in the depths of his eyes. His thumb moved slightly, and then a strand of violet sword chi shot out violently and collided with that ray of light. Bang! Both of them vanished simultaneously. After that, a green ray of light flashed before Mo Qingyu appeared in front of Yang Yi. Eh! Mo Qingyu exclaimed lightly as she watched her attack being blasted apart by Yang Ye's attack, and then a wisp of surprise flashed in her eyes as she said, Your strength improved? Yang Yi didn't speak. He suddenly stomped the ground with his right foot, and his figure transformed into a black ray that swished through the air as he shot explosively towards Mo Qingyu. He hadn't forgotten how she'd treated him when something had gone wrong with his dantian. Now, when they met once more, he intended to kill her even if she didn't desire to kill him. So, at this moment, words were completely meaningless, and only a single word had any importance. It was the word kill. Mo Qingyu's face suddenly turned gloomy when she saw Yang Yi actually dare to attack her, and then she opened her palm. In an instant, a green sword appeared in her palm, and she held it as her figure flashed like a breeze and left a string of afterimages as she shot explosively towards Yang Yi. When they saw Yang Yi and Mo Qingyu enter into battle, both Emoku and Mu Jun's groups had simultaneously stopped fighting for the Nether God Spear for now, because a battle between two formidable sword cultivators was extremely rare. Of course, the reason why they hadn't made a move now was most importantly because they were unable to do anything to each other. On the other hand, Yang Yi, Mo Qingyu, and Xiao Yushi were variables here, because whichever side obtained Yang Ye's help or Mo Qingyu's help could firmly suppress the other side. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed in his eyes when he saw Mo Qingyu shoot over like a bolt of lightning. The profound energy within Yang Ye's body surged madly into the sword in his hand, and then he swiftly slashed it down from above. He hadn't held back this time. When his peak 6th level slaughter sword intent was coupled with the strength of his physical body, space shook violently wherever his sword passed, and numerous sounds of air exploding resounded incessantly like firecrackers. Moreover, under the circumstances that Yang Yi hadn't held back at all, his slaughter sword intent had revealed its terrifying and savage side for the first time. His sword intent hadn't even come into contact with Mo Qingyu when a terrifying force that carried boundless killing intent arrived before Mo Qingyu first. The boundless killing intent within this force seemed as if it intended to wipe out all living beings, and it made others shudder with fear. The others in the surroundings were stunned when they witnessed this scene. Obviously, they hadn't expected that Xianxia's sword intent would actually be slaughter sword intent. Moreover, it had even attained the 6th level. 6th level slaughter sword intent was already capable of being a threat to them. Mu Jun was first stunned, and then he chuckled lightly and said, "It's actually slaughter sword intent, and it's even at the 6th level. Haha, how interesting." Emoka merely glanced indifferently at Yang Yi before he withdrew his gaze, and then his eyes descended onto the violet mink. In his opinion, no matter how terrifying Yang Yi was, Yang Yi couldn't compare to the little fellow. Mo Qingyu revealed a slightly solemn expression for the first time. She understood that she'd underestimated this sword cultivator who stood before her. But so what? How can anyone dare to call himself the Sword Emperor before me? Mo Qingyu. Mo Qingyu's left hand moved slightly before another green sword appeared in her hand, and then she suddenly pressed her hands together, causing the swords to join into one. After that, she shouted lightly, and she held the sword with both hands as she slashed it forcefully at Yang Yi. As soon as their swords came into contact, thunderous rumbling resounded here. At the same time, the ground where they stood had instantly collapsed into an enormous hole. Moreover, their sword intents had gone out of control and started to rage through the surroundings. In less than a breath of time, the ground in an area of 300 m around them had been covered in dense and bottomless scars. On the other hand, Mo Qingyu and Yang Yi had split apart at the instant they collided with each other. At this moment, even though Yang Ye's eyes were crimson red, his mind was extremely clear, and his face turned solemn as he gazed at Mo Qingyu. Because his earth rank sword had already transformed into powder during the collision from before. Moreover, her 7th level sword intent was all-pervasive and had left a dense expanse of scars on his body. Mo Qingyu's condition wasn't very good as well. Even though she'd destroyed Yang Ye's sword, she'd merely succeeded in doing that by relying on the heaven rank sword in her hand. On the other hand, she noticed that if it was in terms of sword intent, then even though Yang Ye's sword intent was merely at the 6th level, it was actually not inferior to her 7th level sword intent at all and even showed faint signs of suppressing her sword intent. This gave her no choice but to reevaluate Yang Yi, because she noticed that when Yang Ye's strength at this moment was compared to his strength during their first meeting, then it was like the gap between the heavens and the earth. But so what? Mo Qingyu twisted her right, and then the green sword instantly disappeared from her hand. After that, she pressed her palms together in midair before pulling them apart, and then a green energy sword appeared there. The green energy sword seemed as if it was material, and it started spinning at a visible speed between her palms. Xiao Yushi's expression changed abruptly when she witnessed this scene. "Watch out! It's the instant death sword." As soon as she finished speaking, Xiao Yushi suddenly tightened her left hand's grip on her saber, while the profound energy within her body surged. However, she didn't make a move, because if she were to make a move and interfere in a battle between sword cultivators, then it would be an insult to both the sword cultivators. The violet mink blinked, and then a violet glow flashed on her little claw. However, she didn't make a move as well. She naturally hadn't stopped because she was afraid of insulting Yang Yi and Mo Qingyu. The reason she hadn't was merely because she felt that Yang Yi could defeat his opponent. That was all. Something worthy of mentioning was that the eyelids of Mo Ku and Mu Jun's groups had twitched when they noticed violet light flash on the violet mink's claw, because they were extremely fearful of this little fellow. After all, it was impossible for them to injure the little fellow unless they joined forces. Yang Yi didn't dare act carelessly when he sensed the terrifying energy contained within the green energy sword, and he didn't dare conceal his strength as well. So, he slowly closed his eyes and entered into a state of clarity. Every single technique in the world had a flaw, and the instant death sword before him naturally had a flaw as well. So long as it had a flaw, then he could destroy it with a single strike of his sword. That was what it meant to be a possessor of the enlightened sword heart. Under the enhancement of her 7th level sword intent, the might of the green energy sword seemed even more terrifying, and it spun at a speed that wasn't visible to the naked eye anymore. The ground around Mo Qingyu seemed to be unable to endure the terrifying might contained within the energy stone and actually started to crack inch by inch. However, Yang Ye's eyes were slightly closed instead while his breathing and expression were calm. It was like he hadn't noticed how terrifying the green energy sword was. Everyone held their breaths and awaited the arrival of this attack. At this critical moment, an unexpected event suddenly occurred. Bang! An enormous bang resounded abruptly, and then an enormous rift around 300 m long had suddenly split open on the ground, and then everyone watched with astonishment as a colossal tornado swept out from within the rift. The tornado was extremely swift, and it instantly left the ground and swept off towards the distance. The tornado was extremely terrifying. It was around 300 m in height. It left a mess everywhere it passed, and it was like the end of the world had arrived. The expressions of everyone here instantly changed, especially Mo Qingyu and Yang Yi. The green energy sword in her hands had instantly stopped when that tornado appeared, and then Mo Qingyu swiftly turned around to gaze at the terrifying and colossal tornado. On the other hand, Yang Yi had suddenly opened his eyes, and they were filled with excitement and happiness, because it was the 9th hell-cold gale. However, Yang Yi was bewildered because it should have been deep underground. Why has it suddenly come out to the surface? Yang Yi didn't have time to think. The profound energy within his body immediately started to surge madly. However, he didn't make a move because he was utterly unable to do so. After all, not to mention his physical body, even Mo's physical body would be minced into pieces by that terrifying colossal tornado. Everyone here was stunned by the tornado. "What's that?" asked Moku upon noticing the tornado. Mu Jun's brows knit together tightly, and he seemed to have thought of something. "See that?" Xiao Yushi suddenly spoke softly by Yang Ye's side. "The 9th hell-cold gale isn't something that you can resist with your current strength. Not to mention subduing it, even approaching it is impossible for you." Yang Yi laughed bitterly. He felt powerless while he gazed at the tornado that raged through the surroundings. This might was truly too terrifying. Not to mention a tiny King Realm Profounder like him, even a Spirit Realm Profounder or Exalt Realm Profounder would be unable to resist that tornado. However, he was truly reluctant to give up just like that, because if he was able to obtain it, then his strength would definitely improve greatly, and he would be even more confident when he faced a colossus like the Flower Palace in the future. Right at this moment, the enormous tornado had suddenly turned around and returned underground, and it vanished in an instant. Right when everyone felt bewildered, Mo Qingyu, who'd remained silent until now, had suddenly transformed into a green shadow that shot underground explosively, and her speed was so swift that it was astounding. "What's she doing?" asked Yang Yi in a low voice. Xiao Yushi pondered deeply for a moment and said, "Her objective might be the 9th hell-cold gale as well, because if she who has comprehended wind intent can subdue it, then she would be like a tiger that obtained wings. Her strength would definitely multiply a few times." Yang Yi pondered silently for a moment, and then he took a deep breath before he nodded to the violet mink. The latter understood his intentions and flickered onto his shoulder. Yang Yi smiling before his figure flashed, and he flashed underground as well. In the end, he was unable to give up on the 9th hell-cold gale just like that. Even if he was going to give up, he would only do it after he gave it a try and confirmed his inability to subdue the 9th hell-cold gale. Xiao Yushi stared blankly at Yang Ye's figure that had shot down into the rift in the ground, and then her figure flashed and followed him. After a short while, Mu Jun suddenly exclaimed, "It's the 9th hell-cold gale." The expressions of the 3 outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory changed when they heard Mu Jun. With the knowledge they possessed, they naturally knew of this natural treasure. The 3 of them were slightly tempted and seemed to desire to subdue that natural treasure. After all, if they were able to subdue it, then their strengths would definitely improve greatly. However, at this moment, Mu Jun suddenly said, "Don't head over to try and obtain that natural treasure." "Why?" Li Qingshui said in a low voice. "Since Yang Yi and that woman could, then why can't we?" "Mu Jun, you want us to stay behind and help you deal with Mo's group, right?" Mu Jun glanced at Li Qingshui, and then he said, "You ought to have noticed the might of that tornado. Do you think you can resist it with your current strength? Moreover, that tornado isn't even the core of the ninth hell cold gale. Its core is more than 10 times more terrifying than that tornado. Then why did Yang Yi and that woman?" Nangong Meng was puzzled. Mu Jun chuckled lightly and said, "That genius from the Mo clan has comprehended wind intent. Coupled with the resources and reserves of her clan, she has a slight chance of being able to subdue the ninth hell cold gale. As for Yang Yi, haha, if he doesn't have any other shocking trump cards, then he's merely courting death. He doesn't look like someone who would do that." Shi Luo said. He didn't reveal any fear when he faced Mo Qingyu's instant death sword just now, and it was even to the extent he didn't show any nervousness. So, I think that he definitely possesses some sort of shocking trump card, or perhaps he has really attained the enlightened sword heart. The enlightened sword heart? Mu Jun chuckled lightly, and then he shook his head and said, "I don't really believe that he has. After all, not a single possessor of the enlightened sword heart has appeared amongst the billions of people in our central region. So how could one appear in the southern territory which possesses scarce spirit energy in the world? Alright, let's take a step back and say that he really has attained the enlightened sword heart. We still don't have to be too afraid of him. After all, he hasn't received standard and systematic guidance in the sword Dao. No matter if it's in terms of battle or equipment, he can't compare with us, right?" "You've already taken him to be an enemy?" said Shi Luo as he gazed at Mu Jun. "It's he who refuses to take us as friends." Mu Jun said indifferently, "Right?" Shi Luo fell silent. Mu Jun. Meanwhile, Mo suddenly said, "I, Mo, am determined to obtain this spear. If you obstruct me, then we don't have to wait for the hidden dragon pagoda, and we can fight to the death right now. What do you think?" Mu Jun frowned. He was naturally not afraid of Mo. However, it was very inadvisable if he had to fight Mo to the death right now, because even though he'd allied with the 3 outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory, they would probably immediately split up with him if they had to fight to the death with Mo and the others. Meanwhile, Mo said, "Mu Jun, you ought to be aware that perhaps it's possible for us to defeat each other with the strengths we possess, but it's practically impossible for us to kill each other. So, if we fight to the death now, then the consequences would be that we're both heavily injured and allow others to take advantage of the situation. Most importantly, it's meaningless for us to fight like that unless we're in the Hidden Dragon Pagoda. What do you think? Then you want me to give up on the Nether God's spear and give it to you just like that?" Mu Jun's brows raised as he spoke. "Tell me your conditions." Mo placed his hands behind his back as he spoke in an indifferent tone. Right at this moment, an unexpected event occurred. A red ray of light flashed by, and then the spear on the stone sarcophagus had instantly vanished. After that, the red ray of light shot towards the distance. At the same time, roaring laughter resounded from afar. "Ha ha! Since all of you don't want it, then give it to me, Jun Wuxia." As soon as his voice finished resounding through the air, the red ray of light had vanished from their fields of vision. "You're courting death," Mo shouted furiously, and then his figure transformed into a black ray that shot explosively towards the red ray of light. Han Yu and Ying Ling hesitated briefly before they followed Mo as well. "It's that fellow, the evil lord." Shi Luo spoke in a low voice as he gazed at the direction where Mo and the others had vanished, and a cold glow surged in his eyes. The gazes of Li Qingshui and Nangong Meng were icy cold as well. The evil lord, Jun Wuxia, was someone that all of them knew. He was both righteous and evil, and he acted completely according to his own desire. Of course, the most important point was his strength. Something worthy of mentioning was that the evil lord didn't belong to the Central Territory, and he was from the Eastern Territory instead. The reason his reputation was so great was that he'd entered the Central Territory in the past. After he entered the Central Territory with just his spear in hand, he challenged the disciples of the various renowned sects in the Central Territory, and he'd practically challenged all the sects that had a reputation. The outcome was naturally that the disciples of those sects were bashed up. In the end, Jun Wuxia targeted the 9th rank sects, which were the sects that the 3 outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory were from. Unfortunately, they were jointly pursuing an Exalt Realm expert at that time, so they weren't at their sects. This allowed Jun Wuxia to return triumphantly, and it caused the 3 9th rank sects to lose face. Now, their expressions were naturally unsightly when they heard that it was Jun Wuxia. "I'm going to test the ability of that fellow called the Evil Lord." Shi Luo spoke these words before his figure flashed and followed in pursuit behind Emoka's group. Li Qingshui and Nangong Meng didn't hesitate to follow him. As he gazed at their figures, Mu Jun chuckled lightly and said, "The Quasi-Sword Emperor, the Quasi-Saber Exalt, the Quasi-Evil Lord, the Quasi-Martial God, the Quasi-Devil Lord, the Quasi-Nether King, and I, the Quasi-Mortal Emperor, who's bound to command the continent. So many monstrous geniuses have appeared in this generation. Haha! Heavens! What's the meaning of this?" After he descended beneath ground level, Yang Yi felt that the cold winds grew even more bone-piercing. Even 5th level Sword Intent was slightly unable to resist the bone-piercing cold winds, so he had no choice but to utilize 6th level Sword Intent to resist the assault of the cold winds. As for the little fellow had very smartly ran off into his tiny vortex when the violet light couldn't resist the cold winds. Right at this moment, Yang Yi suddenly stopped, and then he turned around to gaze at Xiao Yushi, who had suddenly appeared behind him. He said with an astounded expression, "What are you doing here?" "I come and go as I please." Xiao Yushi spoke indifferently, but her expression was slightly unnatural. Yang Yi was stunned, and then a stream of warmth flowed in his heart. How could he be unaware that she'd followed him because she was worried about him? He wasn't being narcissistic, and it was merely because his intuition told him so. Yang Yi shook his head and said in a gentle tone, "This is my decision. No matter what the outcome is, I should face and endure it myself. You really don't have to join in. You've already helped me enough, and I, Yang Yi, will never forget these feelings you have for me." A blush suddenly appeared on her beautiful face, and she glared at Yang Yi with rage and embarrassment as she said, "What do you mean by feelings? Don't talk nonsense or I'll kill you." The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched. "My great lord, what did I say wrong? I just meant the feelings of kindness and friendship. What's wrong with her?" Xiao Yushi lowered her head in silence, and only her hand held tightly onto the hilt of her saber. Xiao Yushi had caused Yang Yi to be at a loss for what to say, and the atmosphere between them instantly became slightly embarrassing again. After a short while, Yang Yi smiled embarrassedly and said, "Miss Xiao, you've witnessed the might of the 9th Hell Cold Gale. I really have zero confidence in my ability to deal with it, so don't follow me. Of course, I'm not scared that you'll be a burden to me, and I'm afraid that I would drag you down instead. At the same time, I don't want you to take such a risk with me. I'm telling the truth." "Then why are you bringing that little fellow with you?" Xiao Yushi suddenly raised her head and stared directly at Yang Ye's eyes. Yang Yi was speechless again, because he suddenly noticed this problem as well. "Why did I bring the little fellow? Is it because I really took the little fellow to be a loved one?" However, this was very normal because the little fellow had experienced life and death with him on many occasions, so he naturally took the little fellow to be a loved one of his. On the other hand, it wasn't that he hadn't taken her to be someone close. After all, she'd helped him a great deal all along the way, and he owed her a little too much. This time, his future was unknown, so he was truly unwilling to make her take a risk with him again. A wisp of disappointment flashed in Xiao Yushi's eyes when she saw Yang Yi remain silent, and then she said indifferently, "I merely want to see how Mo Qingyu subdues the 9th Hell Cold Gale. It's not related to you at all." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure flashed towards the depths of the ground. Yang Yi laughed bitterly when he witnessed this, and then his figure flashed and hurriedly pursued after her. After an unknown period of time, Yang Yi felt that the cold winds were growing stronger and stronger, and it was even to the extent that his 6th level Sword Intent was slightly unable to resist the cold wind. This caused Yang Ye's expression to become solemn, because up until this point, the strength of the 9th Hell Cold Gale had completely exceeded his imagination, and all of this was under the circumstances that he hadn't even laid eyes on its core. Exactly how terrifying was its core? Yang Yi was slightly afraid to think of it. However, he still hadn't thought of retreating. After all, he'd caught sight of the ninth hell-cold gale, so discontent would take root in his heart if he didn't work hard and give it a try, and such a thing was very bad for his path of the sword Dao. Yang Yi shook his head and sped up towards the distance. After almost 4 hours passed, Yang Yi suddenly stopped because Xianxia had stopped in front of him, and then he walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" Xianxia shook her head, and her expression was slightly solemn. "The ninth hell-cold gale is probably not too far ahead because my saber intent is slightly unable to resist the bone-piercing coldness of the ninth hell-cold gale anymore." When she spoke up to hear, she turned around to gaze at Yang Yi before she said, "Are you sure you want to continue forward?" Yang Yi smiled and said, "We're already here, so how could we just go back?" When he spoke up to hear, he gazed at Xianxia and said seriously, "Do you really intend to follow me there?" Xianxia was slightly unable to endure Yang Yi's gaze, and she turned around and gazed towards the distance as she said, "Of course." Yang Yi suddenly smiled and said, "Then let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed towards the distance. Yang Yi and Xianxia both stopped moving. Mo Qingyu was in front of them right now. At this moment, she was gazing ahead with an unprecedentedly solemn expression in her eyes, while fierce and sharp invisible sword intent seemed to have formed a protective barrier around her. Yang Yi and Xianxia looked along the direction of Mo Qingyu's gaze. An expanse of pitch black filled their field of vision, and strands of cold wind seeped out incessantly from there. The cold winds were strong to the point it still invaded their bodies and souls even if the three of them resisted it with all their strengths. Fortunately, while their bodies and souls were invaded, it wasn't lethal. The shape of an enormous tornado could be faintly discerned amidst the pitch-black darkness. It was spinning at a speed that wasn't visible to their eyes, and the space around it was ceaselessly destroyed as it spun. Yes, the expanse of pitch black was exactly the spatial rifts that were blasted open by the ninth hell-cold gale. It at least required the strength of an Exalt Realm expert to cause damage to space, yet the ninth hell-cold gale was able to accomplish it with ease. Moreover, it was a form of constant damage. This caused their expressions to become solemn, as expected of a natural treasure. Even though it's still in its infancy, it already possesses a little natural might. Mo Qingyu spoke in a light voice, and then she turned to gaze at Yang Yi and Mo Qingyu before she said, "Looks like both of you are targeting the ninth hell-cold gale as well. Haha, Xianxia, the ignorant are fearless, but could it be that you're ignorant as well?" Xianxia's fair hand moved slightly, and a strand of cold light instantly appeared in front of Mo Qingyu. The latter grinned lightly before she flicked her finger, and a strand of green sword chi instantly shot forward violently. It struck the strand of cold light, and the two instantly dispersed in midair. "What's the point of that?" Mo Qingyu said. "Our strengths are equally matched, and we're both unable to do anything to each other if we don't utilize our full strength. So, is there any point in wasting profound energy like that?" "You talk too much." Xianxia gazed at Mo Qingyu as she spoke indifferently. Mo Qingyu was stunned, and then she shook her head and chuckled lightly. After that, she gazed at Yang Yi and said, "The future Sword Emperor? Do you know how unworthy you are of such a title?" "Could it be that you are?" said Yang Yi with a smile on his face. "Of course." Mo Qingyu nodded and said, "Besides Mo Qingyu, could anyone else on this continent be more worthy of that title?" Her tone made it sound like it was a matter of course, and there wasn't even a trace of unnaturalness. Yang Yi didn't reveal any ridicule or contempt when he heard this, and his expression became even more solemn instead. Her confidence made him feel slightly fearful. The Sword Dao emphasized greatly on one's mental state. The stronger one's mental state was, the stronger one's Sword Dao would be. Someone that possessed such practically arrogant confidence was either formidable or an idiot. Obviously, she was the former. Yang Yi shrugged and said, "If you like it, then just take it." Yang Yi spoke with extreme sincerity, and he was speaking from the heart. Because not only did this title give him no benefit at all, it caused a huge amount of trouble for him instead. So, he felt that anyone who wanted it could have it. He didn't want it at all. What do you think the title of Sword Emperor is? Is it an object that you can just give away? Mo Qingyu's gaze suddenly turned icy cold, and then a green energy sword instantly appeared in front of her. In the next instant, it transformed into a ray of light that instantly shot explosively towards Yang Yi. Yang Ye's face fell when he saw her suddenly attacking him. What's wrong with her? Yang Yi didn't waste his breath. He clenched his right hand tightly into a fist, and then he blasted his fist at the green energy sword. Bang! The energy sword instantly dispersed. Right when Mo Qingyu intended to continue attacking, the tornado suddenly started moving incessantly towards the surroundings. Yang Yi and the others were shocked, and they retreated repeatedly. Presently, the enormous tornado carried the energy of the heavens and the earth with it, and they would definitely perish if they moved forward. The enormous tornado grew more and more violent, and it raged incessantly in the distance. Everywhere it passed, space was blasted into pieces inch by inch to reveal expanse after expanse of pitch-black spatial rifts. This sight caused Yang Yi and the others to feel extremely horrified. "What's going on with it?" asked Yang Yi in a low voice. Xiao Yushi shook her head. On the other hand, Mo Qingyu's eyes lit up instead, and a glow of excitement flickered in the depths of her eyes. Yang Yi fell silent. At this moment, he was truly conflicted as he gazed at the terrifying tornado in the distance. Even an Exalt Realm expert would probably die when facing this thing, but Elder Mu actually asked me to subdue it. Elder Mu would naturally not send me here to give my life away. Since it's like that, then there's definitely a method or treasure that can deal with the 9th Hellcold Gale, and I should possess that method or treasure. But exactly what is it? In next to no time, Yang Yi thought of something, and it was the tiny vortex. But how should I communicate with the tiny vortex? Since the tiny vortex had refused to give him profound energy that day, he had a feeling that the tiny vortex seemed to be very displeased with him. Moreover, if he wanted the tiny vortex to deal with the 9th Hellcold Gale, then he had to make it enter the tiny vortex. As he gazed at the enormous tornado, Yang Yi resolutely abandoned this thought. What a joke! Make it enter the tiny vortex? He would definitely be courting death by doing that. Right at this moment, an unexpected event occurred. Under the astounded gazes of Yang Yi and the others, the tornado actually started to shrink swiftly. Xiao Yushi spoke with a slightly trembling voice upon witnessing this scene. I understand now. It's transforming to form a gale spirit. Mo Qingyu glanced at Xiao Yushi, and a cold glow flickered in her eyes. What do you mean? Yang Yi was puzzled. Xiao Yushi said, it was originally in an ignorant state and didn't possess any intelligence. Yet now it's transforming. Once it transforms successfully, then it'll form a gale spirit. At that time, it would be at its weakest state, and it would be the moment that it's the easiest to deal with. That's your only chance if you want to subdue it. Yang Ye's eyes instantly lit up when he heard this. Now, he understood what forming a gale spirit meant. It should be something like the nether ghost flame that was within his body. Even though the nether ghost flame couldn't speak or take human form, it possessed intelligence. And this was something that couldn't be doubted. Now, the 9th Hellcold Gale was probably transforming into the state that the nether ghost flame was in. In other words, he had a chance now. However, Mo Qingyu was at the side. Yang Yi glanced at Mo Qingyu, and then the hidden sword appeared in his hand with a twist of his wrist. After that, the profound energy within his body surged madly. He was determined to obtain the 9th Hellcold Gale. At this moment, a strange scene suddenly occurred here. The cold winds in the surroundings suddenly surged towards Mo Qingyu. However, they didn't attack her and surrounded her to form a seemingly material whirlwind instead. On the other hand, Mo Qingyu's body started to become ethereal, as if she was fusing into one with the cold wind. Wind intent. Xiao Yushi tightened her grip on the hilt of her saber upon witnessed this scene, and she said in a low voice, Wind intent is an extremely mysterious intent, because so long as it's a place with wind, then that wind can be utilized by her. She's actually able to control the cold wind here. So it represents that her wind intent has probably arrived at the 7th level or even higher. Yang Yi took a deep breath. Isn't she a little too fucking monstrous? As expected, there's always someone stronger in the world. Xianxia suddenly said. I might not be able to stop her, Yang asked with an astounded expression. Why? Xianxia shook her head, and then she said, I'll try my best. You have to be careful when you subdue it later. Give up if you can't, all right? Xianxia's heart felt warm, and he nodded before he said with a smile on his face, Don't worry, I'll act within the limits of my ability. Xianxia nodded, and then she gradually drew her saber while her gaze locked onto Immortal. The latter didn't even look over towards Yang and Xianxia, and she just stared fixedly at the tornado that was growing smaller and smaller. The enormous tornado shrunk smaller and smaller before their gazes, and it gradually became the size of an adult's body. Even though it had become smaller, the terrifying energy contained within it was horrifying. At this moment, Yang couldn't help but be excited. He was naturally happier the stronger it was. After all, he urgently needed to improve his strength. The whirlwind around Immortal grew faster and faster while her figure grew more and more translucent to the point she seemed like an expanse of clear wind. Light flickered incessantly on the curved saber in Xianxia's hand, and a strand of invisible, fierce, and sharp saber intent surged endlessly from her body. As the saber intent surged out from her body, it didn't seem to be disorderly, and it moved around her body in an extremely orderly manner like it was a protective wall. As for Yang, he was swiftly slapping 5 talismans onto himself, and these talismans included the Strider Talisman, Strength Talisman, Energy Convergence Talisman. At the same time, he stopped holding back at all, and the profound energy within his body surged out like a torrent. Under the enhancement provided by his violet-colored profound energy, a layer of faint violet mist had mysteriously appeared around Yang. However, Yang hadn't noticed it. The speed that the tornado shrunk at grew swifter and swifter before their solemn gazes. At this point, it was only the size of an arm, and it was still shrinking swiftly at a visible speed. Suddenly, the small tornado exploded abruptly with a bang, and then a strand of a green mini-tornado appeared before their fields of vision. Right at this moment, the 3 of them acted. A strand of cold light instantly shot at Immortal. It was swifter than a bolt of lightning, and it instantly arrived where Immortal was. However, that spot was empty right now. Immortal had suddenly appeared in front of the mini-tornado. After that, a palm-sized and golden bell-shaped cover appeared in her hand, and she cupped it down towards the green tornado. The green mini-tornado was stunned on the spot, and then it flashed towards the distance with a swish. However, the golden bell-shaped cover had pierced through space and instantly arrived above the mini-tornado, and then a strand of golden light descended and trapped the mini-tornado. Immortal revealed a delighted expression when she witnessed this scene. However, right at this moment, a strand of cold light and a strand of violet sword chi shot violently towards her for both sides. Immortal grunted coldly, and then she waved her hand before she transformed into a strand of light wind that vanished on the spot with the golden bell-shaped cover. In the next moment, she appeared over 30 m away in the distance. Yang and Xianxia's expressions changed violently when they witnessed this scene. Immortal's speed was truly too swift, and it was swift to the point they were utterly unable to catch up to her. In his anxiety, Yang's eyes suddenly lit up, and then he swiftly shouted, "Little fellow, someone's speed is faster than yours. Are you still not going to come out here?"